Today and over the next few days we will celebrate the birth anniversary of Zainab al-Kubra, the granddaughter of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa and the daughter of Sayeda Fatima al-Zahra sallallahu alayha and Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And although these days are blessed days, days filled with joy, days in which we congratulate the believers on this auspicious and joyous occasion, we also must remember that Sayeda Zainab salamullahi alayhi was the first person to establish the mourning councils and the majalis of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam after his martyrdom. After the brutal slaying and martyrdom of al-Hussein alayhi salam, it was none other than Sayeda Zainab, a woman, a young woman, who was the first person to establish this culture and this ritual of setting up a majlis in order of Abu Abdullah Sayyid al-Shuhada. And therefore, it sets precedent already that this woman is one of great influence, one of great importance, and a role model not just for us men, but also for our women as well. In regards to what is written about Sayeda Zainab, if we look into history and if we look into the books which detail historical narrations and traditions, we find that there is not as much which is written about Zainab al-Kubra as compared to other figures from the Ahlul Bayt, as compared to other members from the household of Rasulullah. But even though this is the case, it does not necessarily mean that we need to dig too deep to try and uncover facts about her. Because when somebody ends up doing this, we can fall into the trap of coming up with exaggerated narrations, stories which are not true. And therefore, the narrations and details that we do have about her are sufficient for us. And the facts and the versions of what occurred during her lifetime that we have are enough to indicate her purity, indicate her importance, and indicate her status as a pious woman who is one of our esteemed role models. Although the information we have is little, it is more than enough for us to understand the personality of this great woman. Now, according to the Sharia, women are designed and created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be hidden treasures. The life of a woman is one which is subtle, which is important and fundamental, but also discreet at the same time. Amir al-Mu'mineen once asked Sayeda Fatima al-Zahra sallallahu alayha, who are the best amongst women? What type of women are best? And she replies to Amir al-Mu'mineen and she says, the women that are best are the ones who are not seen by the eyes of men. The one who men do not cast their gaze or their glances upon. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why there is such little written about Sayeda Zainab in terms of her life outside of the home, in terms of her activities. However, although women are destined and are in their best place, away from the glances of men and away from the public eye, this rule can only apply if all of the other elements of the Muslim society at the time is in order and everything is as it should be. If the application of the Sharia or the divinely appointed laws and rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are chaotic, if they are imbalanced, if there is injustice taking place or there is wrongdoing taking place, then women are in fact obligated and compelled to leave the private home and to go out into the open, to go into the public sphere, to make an appearance. And this is the situation which Sayeda Zainab found herself in. She found that the Sharia was not being applied properly. Why? Because Yazid had decided that he would try and kill and overthrow and take away all of the justice which Imam Hussein alayhi salam sought to bring. Therefore, she as a woman found it obligatory on her, wajib upon her, to leave her private, discreet life and to go out into the open. After Karbala and after the battle of Ashura, we found that there was nobody left who would be able to speak up and to give sermons and to stand in the face of the tyranny and the oppression which was so prevalent at the time. The Imam of the time has just been slaughtered, has just been massacred along with his family and companions. Who is going to stand up to this newly found supposed caliphate? The only person who we find doing so after the events of Ashura and after the events of the first 10 days of Muharram is Sayeda Zainab. She stood up to tyranny. She spoke out, not facing the consequences of what had come to her as a woman. And therefore, most of what we know about her is because of the exceptional circumstances which she found herself in. And that is why there is so little written about her. Because as we know, people will not detail her private life. All they can detail is what they see in the open about her. In my eyes, Sayeda Zainab can be best described as a mountain, as a hill of patience, of sabr. Not just because of what she saw in Karbala, and not just what she saw in terms of her imam, her relative being slaughtered in front of her, and all of her relatives being brutally slain in front of her, but this sabr comes from her early days, whereby it was cultivated within her from her family members. For example, after the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, she returns to Medina and she lives a difficult life without Amir al-Mu'mineen. 10 years after that, she witnesses the martyrdom of her brother, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. She has to live now with the loss of Imam Ali and Imam al-Hassan, something which if we were alive, we would struggle to even cope with. Then, of course, she witnesses what happens in Karbala, something which rewrote the entire course of human history and human nature as well. She witnessed all of this, and as a result, she gained many titles, either during her life and after her death as well. And these titles were testament to the qualities of patience, to the qualities of courage which she had. Some of them include al-Masa'ib, of course, the mother of calamities. Then we have al-Raziyya, we have al-Nawa'ib, the mother of catastrophes, of tribulations. And this patience, as I mentioned, doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't get plucked from thin air. It is something which is cultivated and taught to her from a very young age. It is something which as well comes when somebody has a close understanding and a close proximity to their Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, Al-Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Somebody once comes to him and they ask him about the event of Ashura and what happened in Karbala. And they ask, why did this calamity happen? Why did mankind have to be faced with the tragedy of Karbala? And Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam replies to him and says, it is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to raise the maqam. He wanted to raise the status and the position of the Ahlul Bayt and to give them this very high station which can only be done through the pathway of intense suffering and trials. The best example that we have in order to try and bring this hadith to life is the event of Imam Hussein alayhi salam's martyrdom. Imam Hussein himself says that my grandfather Rasulullah told me that you have a very high position, Ya Hussein, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you will only attain this position in the afterlife once you have attained the position of martyrdom. Once you become shaheed in this world, only then will you reach this truly high station which you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, according to Imam Hussein, his best desire and his best wish was to go and become shaheed, was to go and be martyred fi sabilillah, for the sake and in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so too then, it should be our most important wish, our utmost desire, our craving to become shaheed fi sabilillah. Something we cannot overlook, something we cannot put to the back of our minds. Going back to Sayeda Zainab. She is of course known for her eloquence, something which is detailed in her speech in the courtyard of Yazid, whereby she takes apart brick by brick the entire foundation of which she relied upon. But she's also known for her maturity. For a woman of such a young age in the Arabian Peninsula at the time, she speaks in a way in which many men struggle to speak as well. She was known to be a narrator of traditions and ahadith from both her mother and her father. She narrated traditions from Asma bint Umays. She narrated traditions from Ayman as well. And there are other people who also she passed on the narrations of. And these narrations can be found in our books. They can be found in Bihar al-Anwar and other books and volumes. But as we know, there is not a lot which was passed down to us nowadays from Sayeda Zainab. Now, why is this actually the case? In terms of what she has passed down, we know that in terms of her life and what people have said about her, there is very little because she was forced to stay at home to fulfill her duties. But why is there not a lot which comes directly from Sayeda Zainab herself? Perhaps one of the reasons is that so many of the books of the Ahlul Bayt and so many of the writings and works of the Ahlul Bayt were destroyed. Whether this was done on purpose by the Nawasib, by the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, or whether it be through natural disaster. Sometimes books go missing, sometimes writings get lost. Therefore, there are different reasons why not so much was passed down. But the fact remains that there was a lot of material from Sayeda Zainab that we can imagine, but unfortunately it was lost and was not transmitted properly through to us. It wouldn't have been surprising if there were people sitting in the majalis of Sayeda Zainab who were writing down notes from what she said, the way in which she behaved, the way she acted in front of men and the way she acted in front of women. But it is possible again that these have been suppressed, these have been taken away from us so that we may not understand the true nature of Sayeda Zainab. Of course the opposite is the case. Somebody with a legacy like Sayeda Zainab, the legacy will always be transmitted through to us in a way which we cannot really understand. And that's through the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That wisdom from Allah that we do not really grasp fully the concept of, and something we perhaps may never grasp the concept of. Why? Because it is something which we are so far away from, something which is so incomprehensible for us. One of our scholars quotes from one of the narrators of a hadith, and he says that after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I entered Kufa and I saw Sayeda Zainab. He says, Wallah, I have never seen any woman as fluent, as eloquent as her. And the way in which she addressed people was the exact same way and with the exact same tongue as Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And we know that she, of course, had an amazing presence of mind. And the most important part, which we will touch on today, is her basira, her insight, her understanding of the realities of the world, and how to truly stay on the path of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Not only was Sayeda Zainab herself silenced, or she was the victim of an attempted silencing by Yazid, we know that her legacy, even until today, has also tried to be silenced by the followers of Yazid. For example, when you have dogs like Saddam, may Allah curse him eternally, who tortured and who executed brave female scholars, people who try and attach themselves to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, you see where these oppressors, these dhalims, take their inspiration from. Of course, this doesn't just come out of the blue, and this is not just an opinion. In fact, Saddam himself, when he is torturing Bint al-Huda, he says to one of the guards who is also taking part in the torturing, when you deal with her, make sure that we do not make the same mistake as Yazid did with Sayeda Zainab. Yazid killed Hussein. He thought he got what he wanted. But he made the mistake of letting Sayeda Zainab live so that she could spread the message and the revolution of al-Hussein further. He says, don't make this same mistake. Therefore, when we talk about having Husseini mindsets, we also must be aware that there is Yazidi mindsets which are also taking place at the same time. And it is important that we choose the Husseini one over the Yazidi one. And some may say that this is an easy path to take. If it was an easy path to take, then why was al-Hussein so few in numbers? And why was Yazid so large in numbers? Today we also have to ask ourselves the same questions and look at the Hussein of today as well. And when we see in Sham, in Syria today, those takfiris, those Wahhabis who prevented the adhan, which includes the name of Amir al-Mu'mineen, being recited from the shrine of Sayeda Zainab, you see that this silencing still takes place today. But, as is always the case, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come through. And we will continue to go to the shrine of Sayeda Zainab. We will continue to visit the shrine of Sayeda Zainab until the days in which the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam also have control over her shrine as previously before. And the blood of the shuhada who went to Sayeda Zainab will not be left in the books of history for us to forget about. They will become our living, breathing memory and reminder for us to fulfill our duty to Sayeda Zainab. Now, something extremely important which we need to be aware of is the different types of warfare which was launched against the Ahlul Bayt and their followers up until today. When you look at the history of the family of Rasulullah, you can see that not just did oppressors go to war physically with them, but they also went to war psychologically with them as well. We know about all the battles which took place. We know about the Battle of Karbala. We know about the Battle of Jamal. We know about all of these things. Raised by Muawiyah, raised by Yazid, raised by Bani Umayyah, raised by Bani Abbas, waging war against the followers and the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And the descendants and the supporters of the family of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had to endure all of these battles. But I think that what we have today and what we have been living in for perhaps the last 100, 200 years is a much more powerful global issue and warfare which affects us. And it's the psychological warfare which is utilized by the enemy through culture, through religion, through the media especially. The Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam were always very aware and very conscious of what was going on around them and the plots which were targeted towards them and their followers. They were aware of the kind of society they lived in, what the mindset of people that were around them was. But I don't think that we can say the same for our communities today. We cannot say the same for our ummah today. We do not really have the basira in which the Ahlul Bayt and their true followers had. Why do I say this? If you look now in Sudan, the genocide which is happening in Sudan, yesterday 2,000 innocent civilians brutally killed. So much so that there was satellite photos taken of that city in Sudan, and you could see that the ground had turned red, just like in Spiker when they massacred all of the young shuhada, and the river turned red. Yet, people are not aware that what's happening in Sudan is being funded with the money from the Emirates, from Dubai, from Abu Dhabi. All of their money and weapons is going to killing the people of Sudan. Yet some of us, we still decide that for our holidays we'll go to Dubai, we will give them our money, we will go to Abu Dhabi and live their lifestyle, fund their government, fund their oppression which takes place. It's incomprehensible how people have this mindset. But even worse, if we look to what happened in Gaza, and we look at what happened to our brothers and our sisters and our children and the way that they were slain, look how they got cut into pieces. Look how mothers would find the limbs of their children lying bloodied in the middle of the street. This became so apparent to even non-Muslims that thousands of them went on a boat to try and break the blockade on Gaza, to try and get through and give these people help and give them aid. But yet, we sit here as Muslims, as people who say one of the usul al-din, one of the roots of our religion is the concept of adalah, is the concept of justice. Yet, we have people claiming to be from the Ahlul Bayt who are inviting Zionists into their Husayniyas, into their masajid, and they say that it is due to nice glittery reasons, interfaith, all this. How can we tolerate this deviancy? How can we sit and say what is happening there is so bad and we as Muslims stand against it, yet we welcome them with a handshake into our places of worship? The Shaheed, Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, says, إِنَّ مَنْ يَقْبَلْ الْإِسْلَامَ مَعَ إِسْرَائِيل فَقَدْ خَرَجَ الْإِسْلَامِ. Whoever makes peace with Israel has left Islam. He has gone far away from Islam. He has left his religion, the one who makes peace with Israel. What does it mean, make peace with Israel? Does it mean that you are like the people in Dubai, or that you are like the king of Morocco, or the king of Jordan, where you shake hands with Netanyahu? No. That is not making peace with Israel. Of course it is a form, but what Shaheed al-Sadr means here is working with people who accept and support Israel. It means working with people who have hatred towards Muslims and who are on the side of the Zionists. It means working for their agenda, whether it be openly or whether it be hidden. working with the Zionists in any form means that a person has left Islam entirely. Because we would say the same thing. Israel is the same as Yazid. Anybody who stands on the side of Yazid has left Islam. Anybody who sides with Saddam has left Islam. Anybody who sides with Israel today has left Islam. Easy. But for some people it's not easy. For some people they put it out of their heads and it becomes a daily occurrence for them to work with these Zionists, to invite them into our centres, to become friends with them, to normalise tatbiq. This is the most dangerous thing. And this is what Shaheed al-Sadr warns us about. And if we take it further back in history, if we look at the Umayyads and we look at the Abbasids, our scholars consider them non-adl oppressors, people who did not care about adal, did not care about justice. And so the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt strictly forbade their followers for engaging in any way or any normality with these oppressors. They were not allowed to become tools for the Zalimeen. In Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not be inclined towards those who are unjust. Otherwise the fire will touch you, and you have no guardians besides Allah, and you shall not be helped. Now the choice of words by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse of the Holy Quran is extremely powerful, and He wants us to look at it. He says that a person who has even a slight inclination or desire to be close to work with, to be friends with the Zalimeen, leads to hellfire, leads to the fire of Jahannam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say those who openly go and side and fight with the oppressors. He said those who even have the slightest inclination towards supporting them. So having a soft spot for these oppressors can result in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wrath and His anger the same way as being an oppressor themselves would have. Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt showed through their actions and their words that the only way to treat oppressors, the only way to treat tyrants is to resist them. And of course the best example is from Imam Hussein Sayyid Shuhada. After his encounter with the army of Hur, the Imam led the Dhuhr prayers. He then addresses the army and he speaks to them, giving them instructions and giving them religious lessons as well. In this, he narrates a hadith from Rasulullah where he says that Rasulullah told us any person who sees a tyrant king or a tyrant ruler who disobeys Allah's prohibitions, who breaks the covenant of Allah concerning adl or adalah, who opposes the sunnah of Allah, who acts on the basis of sin, then the person who sees that tyrant king and he does not change his action or his speech, then it is rightful of Allah to hold that indifferent person equal to the tyrant on the Day of Judgment. Similarly, when Amir al-Mu'mineen was struck by the sword of Ibn Muljam, may Allah curse him, he calls Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein to convey his last will and to convey his last message to them. And in these final moments, he says something to them which beautifully sums up the issues which we have been discussing today. He says to Imam Hassan and Hussein, remember, you have to be the opponent of the Zalimeen and you have to be the supporter of the Madlumeen. You have to be the oppressor you have to be the enemy of the oppressor, and you have to be the helper or the supporter of those who are oppressed. Sayeda Zainab utilized this concept so well in her life, especially when she gives her sermons in the courtyard of Yazid. She is known for her wisdom, her hikmah, her basira, and therefore we need to look at ourselves on this blessed day where she is born and ask ourselves, do we act with the same wisdom and the same insight which she has? No. We need to be much more aware of the environment and the circumstances which we are faced with today. And we need to be much better informed, especially for our shabab, for our young people, as to what they are being subjected to, whether it is in their secular lives, whilst they are at school, college, university, work, or whether it be in their Husayniyas, in their masajids. We need to see what curriculum they are being taught. We need to see what the elders are bringing to them and portraying as acceptable, portraying as not acceptable. And we need to put a spotlight on this to make sure that they are being given the absolute best and correct guidance of Islam. If Amir al-Mu'mineen had not had the correct basira and not had the correct insight, then he wouldn't have had the wisdom to engage in certain battles and stand back from other battles. He knows that it was important for him to go, for example, into the battle of Khaybar, the battle of Jamal, but he also recognizes that when the caliphate is taken from him, he has to sit back. Why? He tells us this perfectly. He says that if I rose up and caused a revolution or a war in this moment of time, then I would be responsible for the blood of Muslims. The negatives outweigh the benefit for me to do so. So when we have to fight our battles, we need to have the insight beforehand, so that we are ready, so that we are prepared, so that we are victorious, and that we do not fail or make a fool out of ourselves. And to finish, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be granted the possibility of ziyarah to Sayeda Zainab salamullahi alayha. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be granted the shafa'ah, the intercession of Sayeda Zainab. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be granted the honor of becoming shuhada in the path of Sayeda Zainab. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant victory to the mu'mineen and madhumeen, and for all of the shuhada, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha after salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.